And really thanks to Gabo for hosting this here. And maybe it might be of interest to the audience. I see we have about 60 people now, which is great. So this was planned, I think, in January or something like this as a real in-person event that we wanted to have in February or something like this. When Mario and I actually wanted to discuss, well, where's the future of mobility going? Is it already here? Is it arriving anytime soon, or is it far out here? And so trying to still keep that theme, we basically said, okay, let's have a virtual discussion. And Mario and I, we've been working a lot also together with discussions on YouTube and things like this. And therefore, it's great to do it here today at GABA. So really, thanks for having us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you very much for everyone for joining us. I think everyone is homebound at the moment, sitting in shelter in place in your apartment, although the restrictions are getting lifted a little bit more. But what we've seen, I think, is how mobility changed during this situation, and how interesting it is for a lot of you is also the questions that we got beforehand about COVID-19, the situation of how it changes. The developments in autonomous driving, in electric driving, in general, in mobility. And let's just, Sven, dive in quickly into that. So I think one of the initial points was I had this book coming out in October last year, The Last Driver's License Holder Has Already Been Born, is the title of that, the cheeky title of that book, basically saying that within the next 10 to 15 years, you won't need a driver's license anymore. Actually, it will be forbidden to manually drive on public roads because you will be driving way too badly in comparison to an autonomous car. And some of these things seem to be through this pandemic now to accelerate, and some others seem to change completely. On the one side, we see a company like Starsky Robotics, a company that was developing self-driving trucks, folding right now, not being able to raise money, who had tried to get remote controlled trucks on the road. A lot of companies laying off people, including Zoox, Kodiak Robotics, General Motors, GM Cruise, and so on. Everyone stopping their activities. But then on the other side, we see delivery robots suddenly popping up everywhere, because this is the only way to keep drivers and people safe from getting in touch with people with infection. So the attention suddenly goes to robotic and autonomous system. And I'm still believing, I'm still thinking, looking at the developments that we see, that some players may be really immediate in a sense, launching a larger self-driving car technology, taxi fleet, a robo-taxi fleet, because during those times, a player like Waymo raised in total now $3 billion. And looking at what they already can do, it looks like a rollout into multiple other cities is imminent. Because what do you do with this money? Planning these kind of things. So that's my opinion. Now Sven is a little bit more careful. He's probably the moralist.
Well, let's see what how Sven would craft it himself. And I think, Mario, it's really great how you pointed it out, because it shows us again how important mobility and transportation is. Because no matter what the situation is, the internet only gets us so far. Like, we can connect people, but we cannot really get our food virtually to our house unless we 3D print oats or fruit or something like this. And thankfully, that's not there yet. So transportation is ultimately important. And what I just can't help, Mario, but really want to probe a little bit further. And you called your title, or the title of your book, Cheeky, The Last Driver's License Holder Has Already Been Born. And I want to contrast this with a remark that was made on a similar event just a couple of weeks ago, similar setting, similar context, obviously, COVID. And someone called Amazon and UPS the Red Cross of modern times, where the care packages arrive to, call it disaster zone, but definitely to people in need. So no UPS driver needed anymore in a couple of years. So therefore they don't need a driver's license issuance anymore. Is that really, are you trying to make a strong point to get people think? Or do we really believe, as you said, in 10 to 15 years, it will be forbidden to get a driver's license and to drive?
Well, what I see, funny talking about that. Those companies that you just mentioned, they're hiring like crazy. So this transportation industry delivering stuff is hiring tens of thousands of people because there is no other choice at the moment. We don't have those robots, those autonomous systems. Even if we had those robots coming there, somebody has to carry the package to us. I see, of course, the current state of those delivery robots. They are pretty awkward. These little robots driving on Mountain View and in Redwood City, and the Kiwi bots in Berkeley. What they all have in common is that they're still very careful. They're driving on our walkways, pedestrian ways, and have troubles crossing streets because cities and buildings are not built for robots. They may have the Section 408 code for handicapped people, that we have ramps and for blind haptic systems, but robots can touch a button on an intersection, or they can't open a door really in a building. So we may see actually building codes changing there, and that would change the dynamics in how many people we actually would need. Now, there are two complementary things. We see that 30 million people, 36 million people in the US filed for unemployment within the last 6 or 7 weeks. And many, very tragic, awful situation. And many now have no other choice than moving into maybe the gig industry, becoming a system relevant employee. But on the one side, we see Uber, the passenger taxi service, basically their passenger transport basically collapsing down to 20% of the normal capacity, while Uber Eats just shoots through the roof, and every food and package delivery staff. But still, it does not solve the problem of how can we make these employees safe from getting infected. And I would expect now way more investments into delivery vehicles, delivery robots that can do that without that. So I see an excellent for more interest in that.
And I think it's also very important to note one thing in what you just said, which I don't disagree with. That you said, okay, then they shift drivers from Uber to Uber Eats, and they can deliver food to our places, right? Which actually tells us, I think, that the human, other than the robot, is ultimately creative and flexible. And you can say, okay, you used to drive your whatever Honda Civic to bring people to the airport, but now you basically bring pizza from whatever, California Pizza Kitchen through the Uber Eats network to Sven's house or something like that. And that, I think we should not forget that, especially maybe as a quick response, humans are very good. Humans are also flexible, and humans get creative in figuring all of this out. And with this, I also want to say, my point always is, there is no black or white, not an either or, not a good or bad. There's a lot in between. And I mean, there's no matter what, there's gonna be more automation and autonomous driving. There's more connectivity and sharing. We might discuss later in this session here as well, where that's going, but there's definitely more technology coming into all of it. But I have a hard time saying in 10 to 15 years, it is only this. And I want to explain a little bit maybe why I'm saying it this way, because I've been called both, actually, an optimist and a pessimist. But quite frankly, I've been called a pessimist more often than an optimist, and that's fine. But when I started my work in mobility at Stanford University, and some of the audience here on the show today probably remembers this and actually has been an ally with me since the last crisis, actually, 2009. Back then, I said 2009, you know what? Ownership, it's over. It's going to be all sharing. The climate really is in bad situation. This is 2009, after the movie from Al Gore, Inconvenient Truth, and all of this. Everybody's going to be electric. And while autonomy is happening, my colleagues at Stanford in particular are working strongly on it. Well, we're going to have all autonomous vehicles. And I just figured there's only very, very few things that go all the way in one direction with 100%. Smartphones, digital photography, and so on, that is something. But mobility, which has a huge component of personal preference, and also how much actually everybody can invest. Not everybody can afford a Tesla. Probably not everybody will be able to afford an autonomous car. Maybe not everybody wants to. And this is just where I have a hard time saying 10 to 15 years, it will be only this. So what's your take?
So there are a number of signals that are pointing in different directions, in the directions that you say where you're skeptical about that, but there are also signals that are pointing in the direction where it may be accelerating. I'll give you 2 or 3 examples. One is a wife of a trucker in Germany, for example, said, yeah, my husband transported all these goods, all these emergency goods, this goods that you needed, from food to medicine to equipment that was in dire need. And while was all working and he enjoyed the highway that was empty, he had other issues that he encountered at the highway rest stations. Of course, they were also shut down. That means there was nobody there operating and serving them. So if you wanted to go to the bathroom, the bathrooms were all open. These bathrooms were not cleaned. So basically you could not properly use that. So suddenly this kind of supporting infrastructure for a system relevant worker and mobility specialist became unusable. And we have no, and just a week or 2 weeks before that, I saw at Berkeley at an event that was going on by TechCrunch, a toilet cleaning robot that somebody had developed. So suddenly people start thinking of, maybe we need robotic systems in way other situations than we thought of. Another signal in the direction of acceleration is Tesla, as basically the doom scenario for the German automotive industry, was able to deliver cars and have test drives with their cars for their customers during shutdowns, because they could give them remote access to the car, which no other car vendor could do. We see that now that, for example, in the last, in April, in Europe, I think the numbers dropped by over 90% of fewer cars were sold in comparison to last year because of the whole shutdown. But Tesla was somehow able to do something like this. And that gives now a clear signal for everyone else. We need to accelerate of what we do. Not only that, basically give them access to the car remotely, so that you enter there, sit down in the car, watch the videos for how to use that car on the big touch screen. But maybe in the future also just send the car out there and it's driving alone and it's being delivered. On the other hand, we had this discussion, and Sven, you mentioned that, are we going more into sharing? Yeah, this was basically the tendency. And now the Austrian AAA had asked me for a comment on that, and how the future of mobility will be looking like once COVID is over. And I said, paradoxically, we will see probably 2 different things in the immediate future. First, we will have fewer traffic, but we will have more cars, because a car becomes the isolation chamber on 4 wheels. So even younger folks who had so far not considered or did not want to have a car, and we saw these large trucks, the millennials, will be looking at cars, while public transport maybe not be that popular for the next month because of the potential hazard of encountering somebody in close spaces. And then certain types of mobility like scooters, people may be too careful touching it, working with that because it may be dirty, not clean. So there may be a lot of other solutions that are required for a post-pandemic, that people who change their behaviors, not shaking hands, are trying to be careful, that it comes in. So some of those activities may be actually accelerating. Some others may be slowing down.
I agree. And what this points to is what I've come to say. I said a little bit earlier, like 10 years ago, I was like all in with it's only going to be electric, it's only going to be autonomous, it's only going to be shared. And then I figured, oh, there's a lot of, let's say, vanilla in between black and white, right? And by now, I've come to say the following, which is a tough statement for an independent consultant, for a lecturer at Stanford University, to say, I don't know what the future looks like. I see all these points. And also one quote actually that I've been using in my talks lately is from Steve Jobs, actually. Steve Jobs said, you cannot connect the dots looking forward. You cannot say, I see this and this and this, and therefore that's going to happen. You can only connect them looking backwards. You can say, I want this to be the future. And then let's do all of this. Because otherwise, and we are both from a technology background and education, we just extrapolate with too little of a basis and we're just ways off. So this is where I'm coming from, where I'm saying, well, I hear what you say, and there's a lot of truth absolutely in this, but still, where's all this pointing? And I actually wanted to throw one more thing in the discussion, Mario, if you will. Are you familiar with Vroom? Vroom, V-R-O-O-M.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I'm somewhat familiar with them. I looked them up for the first time in December when they got another round of funding of $700 million or so. And they are just going IPO. IPO with a somewhat unknown valuation. Some people say might be $1.5 billion for a used car sales platform. Used automobiles, like more than $1 billion. It's like, what? And when you look up the communication around them, then they talk about what the growth trajectory for used car sales is. And apparently there must be companies, VCs, I guess, to give them money. Otherwise it wouldn't get to the $700 million in funding. So I think this is all part of the mix. And this is what gets me excited about mobility, that it's so many more things than just 100% this, 100% that. Because it serves the need that society at large and that economies have to actually get everything going. And I think the mix is really what it's going to be. Without a doubt, and that's the last thing I would say, without a doubt, there's a lot of innovative things happening. And I'm absolutely thankful to Tesla for what they've been doing and all the things where they're kicking behinds of the traditional automotive industry. I find it ultimately hard to say where it's all going to go. It's going to be exciting to be part of the ride.
I guess one thing that definitely accelerates is the switch to electric cars. Not only, in the past, was those non-Tesla drivers or those who had not experienced Tesla, it had always this kind of geeky feeling. These are these electric car mobility enthusiasts who are basically driving a car that's not, or maybe a little bit worse than whatever the combustion engine car was. But that's not anymore the feeling. A lot of good electric vehicles are there. You see that with these bailouts that are coming now from the governments, that a lot of them try to tie that to climate neutral actions, including the car industry. So the German car industry, for example, is working with that. And the government, I think, looks like they're more resisting, not tying it to climate neutral things. They've been supporting more electric vehicles. I think they're now even talking about not having a value-added tax, which is 19% in Germany, for electric vehicles, for purely electric vehicles. And we've also seen the latest numbers that were there was that first quarter in 2019, there were in the European Union, 2.5% of all vehicles that were newly registered were electric battery electric vehicles. And in the first quarter of 2020, it shot up to 6.8%. So we saw almost a tripling of those numbers. At the same time, with all this transportation being shut down during the Corona crisis, many people noticed the first time of how cleaner the air is. Yeah, I mean, the people in New Delhi could the first time in decades see blue sky.
The Himalaya again.
Yeah. And that changes suddenly, I think, your perception to, okay, maybe electric vehicles are really much better because there you don't see that kind of smog that you have.
There's no doubt, I find. There's no doubt.
And so I think more and more in the UK, they did a survey on that, and there is a large number during the Corona crisis, and suddenly the numbers of people considering looking into electric vehicles significantly jumped up. So certainly something coming. With these cars, especially then the Tesla, coming with semi-autonomous features and advanced systems, more and more people experience those features and say, well, I could actually imagine also not driving myself anymore. If this comes then as a robotaxi fleet, as in a shared system or ownership, I think that changed a bit, yeah, thanks through the Corona crisis. I would have said always robotaxi fleets will take over, given the price of those systems, and even still they're dropping with the sensors and the lidars are currently the most expensive stuff. It may be taking longer. Yeah? But
let's see. We might want to queue up one of our first surveys that we have, but wait for a few more minutes, because Mario, there's also one thing that I've come up to say in these interviews that I think both of us and many others on the call probably as well are getting every once in a while from analysts, consultants, and students who are writing their thesis and comparing different parts of the industry. And one question is always about when will we have autonomous vehicles? We might want to discuss this as well. And the other questions are often around like, well, Tesla has it all figured out and it's Elon Musk, and why is Volkswagen or Mercedes not getting it? And I've come to say the following. Look, if I was going to recommend to Elon Musk, hey, you should look into combustion engines, I mean, that would be totally stupid, right? I mean, what would I be thinking if I recommended to Elon Musk, you should look into gasoline engines? But would I tell Herbert Diess, the CEO of the Volkswagen Group, you know what, as of model year 2022, 1.5 years out from now, go away with all combustion engines and only do electric vehicles? Would that be a smart advice? I personally don't think so. And that's, again, where we have a lot of gray zone and vanilla and all of that in between. What we must not forget, okay, we can call these established companies dinosaurs. Okay, fine. But there's a lot of momentum, and whether always played the right way, but also a lot of social responsibility. To say, well, these are corporations, 200, 300,000 employees, and also a customer base that still keeps buying these vehicles. In Germany, for instance, more than 20 years ago, we had the 3-liter Lupo, we had the Audi A2, we had the first smart vehicle. So a lot of like, at least low emission, not really zero emission, but low emission vehicles exist. But one of the most popular vehicles today is like medium-sized SUVs. And in all of this, the industry is operating, and after all, for-profit organizations and hard to change organizations. But what do you recommend someone like a CEO of a big German car company versus here's Elon Musk and have it all figured out? What's your advice?
Should we want to put out the poll first? Do we have the
Let's
first
do the
poll?
poll.
Yeah,
The first
Yvonne,
question
can we
from the
ask you
poll.
to? So what is
Bailout
your
question?
opinion?
Yeah.
I also answer it.
It's all anonymous, right?
You know, I don't want to be in the the shoes of a CEO of a traditional large 100-year-old car company that has a lot of history, a lot of legacy, a lot of successes, build up a lot of value, like Volkswagen. I mean, they have hundreds of thousands of employees worldwide. Yeah, we're talking here about over 600,000 employees. They're manufacturing 11 million cars. There's a history of over 100 years, and they and the timeline, BMW is certainly building fantastic cars in this. And a combustion engine is a highly complex thing. Yeah? 2,000 components that work flawlessly together over 1.5 decades, basically, is quite a feat to do that. And you have a customer base and fans and loyal customers here that have been, you know, having the first kiss, the first sex in such cars.
No details.
No details. Having been conceived maybe even in those cars. So all these things, there's a lot of emotion. That's what I want to say. There's a lot of emotion.
I assume you can do the same in an electric vehicle.
I'm sure about that. Yeah, you can even in Tesla, you can even have a fireplace, a Yule log on your screen, so it makes it even more romantic. Now you have this legacy. You have millions of cars that are still running for them, for you care. You have built up a complete infrastructure for mechanics and workshops and books and history on that. And fan clubs and everything. And I just mentioned the Golf GTI, the largest one meeting that is always happening currently, where thousands of those fans of these pimped cars are coming, tuned up cars, and getting a lot of tickets because they are all doing these crazy things there. And I'm switching to new technology that nobody's familiar with, and many rumors flying around is very difficult. But when you look soberly, rationally at the trends and how the technology goes down and the prices go down and the technology becomes simpler, there is, I think, no way that you do not shift your strategy towards electric at the moment. You have thousands of components fewer that you have to build in. It's much less complex. It's cheaper as it looks like. The battery prices are falling so low that basically purchasing and operating an electric vehicle becomes so much cheaper that even the most loyal fan of a combustion engine car, even if they don't have much money, start thinking about that. But it's not just about that. You wouldn't eat a Beyond Burger or something like that. Our people are very skeptical, I see here in the feedback. The response was, no, only if tried. Okay, yeah, great, wonderful. But what with food, for example, you may have heard about Impossible Burger or Beyond Meat, you know, this burger.
I've tried it, yeah.
Patties. And the first time I had a Impossible Burger there in Oakland up there, it tasted really, actually better, at least in this burger bar that I was, than a real burger. And I thought, wow, that's I could live with that. I just had mayonnaise, this mayonnaise replacement, which is a company in San Francisco. And it also, there's no difference. I would not know. Yeah? And when you sit now in an electric car, a Tesla, given that, and the joy of driving, you figure out, oh my God, this is so much fun driving that. Very different to that. And I think that is what people have to experience. And now more and more people are experiencing that, and there's a huge loyal fan base. So given that and having these here, I think you can't just tell these that. You have the Volkswagen CEO to drive himself that thing. And I think he's the guy who actually did that and admires, to my understanding, admires what Tesla has achieved and what it has done. But I think there are a lot of Volkswagen employees or people in the industry who feel very, very uncertain about that. And one of the reasons for that is certainly you spent 20, 30 years of your personal career on building the best combustion engine in the world. And now suddenly somebody tells you, we're going to kill your baby. That is basically your whole world breaks down. And this, I think, and then the immune system of the company basically starts reacting, gets this intruder of electric vehicles. And if you made your career in the Workers' Council, in management, is expertise on the combustion engines, it is very difficult. And I see that at Daimler, for example, a lot of people just try to get into retirement and say, oh, that's going to happen after me. Teacher was known for that. He was not interested really in electric vehicles. And that shows also the strategy that the company has, that they have problems with.
Yeah. And again, that's absolutely what I've not just observed, actually experienced firsthand. When I started at a big German OEM working on electrified vehicles 15 years ago, was a collaboration actually in Michigan, where we had a team from Germany and working together with Michigan OEMs. And it was hard to tell our colleagues from Germany, look, the 0 to 60 acceleration, and whether this vehicle can go 250 kilometers per hour on a German Autobahn, those are interesting, but not the primary focus of this product development. It's much more about sustainability. It's also learning about a new technology and actually enabling the entire organization to actually think more and more electric. Yeah. Now, that was 15 years ago. There was, to put it in these time frames, even before the first iPhone. So in that case, decades ago. But my point is, and that's what I also tell my clients, and what's related to my point, to tell the hype from reality apart. Things in the automotive industry don't happen as quickly as in other industries. And that's, I think, the silver lining for the industry at large. It might be the chagrin of many people who really want to see things happen faster, but there is this slower moving, call it dinosaur. And therefore, I'm actually hopeful for traditional companies that they can adapt, and not just adapt, but also shape what the next, let's say, chapter in electrification is going to look like. Because I'm also quite curious what the next generation of Teslas might be. And it might be defined by Teslas, or it might be defined by someone else who then shows how this works. So bottom line is, yes, people need time to adapt to it. And I got upset and impatient as well because it was taking so long. But it might work in favor of the overall concept of that industry, that maybe some obituaries but maybe written prematurely.
Yeah. What I'm concerned is that the traditional industry, car industry, is currently cutting a lot of these programs due to the coronavirus crisis, and they're bleeding cash, like everyone else. But what they're doing, you see to the numbers that they are cutting down on the autonomous driving systems, on the electric vehicle development, and of course technologies.
Shared mobility services, GM.
Shared mobility services.
Yeah.
And I'm concerned about it because the reason is not that they're doing it because they don't have money. Yeah? We're not talking here about somebody like Tesla, who has really limited resources, but we're talking about companies that still are profitable, that make billions of dollars of profit every quarter, and have cash reserves that are like 10 or 20 times that what Tesla has. But they're doing it because they want to, have dividends, distribute dividends, and do these kind of things. And I think that's wrong, because this is the moment to double down on those technologies, seeing how what is changing. And that has to do probably with the way these companies are structured. Yeah? On the one side, you have companies, General Motors, Ford, Honda, Toyota, that are over 100 years old. So the founders are gone. They are, in the best case, still the family somehow, the supervisory board are owning shares. But then you have mostly management that is there for 4 years or 8 years and doing that stuff. and their success is tied to the shareholder value or the way the shares go up. So you tend to do things that give you in a short notice, raise the share prices. You even go to these strange things and buying back shares like General Motors has done. They have spent since 2010 about 16 or 18 billion dollars in buying shares back instead of using that money to invest in future technologies. This is just trying to raise the share prices.
Yeah.
While somebody like Elon Musk, they go full risk. They're always on the brink of bankruptcy and be necessary to get some more money. But then look at the share value, at the market capitalization of these companies. Tesla is worth more than Ford and General Motors combined, twice as much worth. Yeah.
Whatever that means, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Again, I have a hard time pointing just to one thing. If you say, well, it's only about the dividend. This is why they are supposedly cutting down on these programs. I think there's a multitude of reasons, and the decision-making that I've been part of, believe me, is not just like one bullet point on a slide that says dividend. You might want to read between the lines and maybe see it there. But let's go back to this poll. I don't know if we can pull up the poll again, but it was one third of our audience here says, no matter what, the government should rescue the traditional car industry. And that was clicked in light of the option to tether climate action to it. It's 1/3. And let's just assume for the moment that we have an audience here that's skewed more towards Silicon Valley and such. Do you find this amazing?
That there's still so many
or so little. I mean, do you find it amazing? I find it amazing.
Yeah.
It's 1/3, right?
The question is maybe, what does the traditional car industry serve for? What is it worth? What is it doing for us? Is it important for the Silicon Valley industry?
I think these days, look, it used to be it's Silicon Valley or traditional automotive industry and was butting heads, but now it's become much, much more this, which I've observed for the last, give or take, 6 years, and that's good. I think, I do think that Silicon Valley could survive without the traditional automotive industry, but I think it's clear to say that the traditional automotive or the automotive field has inspired many and much in Silicon Valley as well. I mean, all the LiDAR technology, many applications for artificial intelligence, display technology, electronics in automotive, all this has inspired Silicon Valley for sure. And also, Mario, we can go on forever, and we will. I'm definitely looking forward to this, even beyond this thing. This is about the time when we wanted to gravitate towards the open question session. But
right, do you want to make another poll? I know you had another poll, right? Do you want to do that first, or?
We basically have polls on more like government influence also.
Yeah.
I think we
could. I mean, I can go either way. I would assume that the audience maybe wants to chime in as well, or the questions that I think Caroline you have listed.
Okay, let's start on some questions then. Oh. So yeah, we had a lot of questions on how COVID-19 is going to change the path of mobility. So maybe you can give us a brief overview of what you think. So is it going to change the path of mobility, especially regarding shared mobility? On the one hand, people going together in one car, is that going to be an issue? On the other hand, maybe it's the opposite. Maybe it's going to accelerate it because people don't want to take public transportation, right? There are two ways to think about it. And do you have a feel already what investors are thinking? Are people investing more, less? Are they cautious? What do you think what's going on there right now?
all of the above. And I think it's another important realization. There's not just one answer. But what is one single thing is, I think we all have an example now what black swan actually means and what it can be. And therefore, as a little personal insight, I was for the first time like really introduced to the concept of black swan at the end of 2015. The thing has been entertained already for longer, but at the end of 2015, I was working at a large consulting company, and we drafted a study, The Future of Mobility 2030. And then when we were almost done, one of the partners came in, okay, now I want you to think about a black swan. And I said, black swan, what might that be? You come up with 9/11 or something like this. But this is obviously such a moment where all the traditional forecasting, all the traditional thinking just doesn't apply anymore. And one simply doesn't know. I mean, for sharing, you can say, yeah, who wants to share, right? I mean, who wants to get in a vehicle where someone else was in there where you might be concerned? Mario made the point earlier, who wants to grab the handlebar that someone else grabbed before this? But also then you actually see how entrepreneurs, innovators, and any individual stands up to the occasion and says, it is mobility that is actually important and people want to go places. You might just start as, okay, you have to wipe off this door handle anytime after you drop someone off, and you put like a little strip over it, same that you find on your toilet seat at a hotel, like this has been sanitized. So there will be solutions to it. In the short term, absolutely, there's a big impact. Mario cited those numbers earlier, to what extent shared transportation for people is impacted. There might be a shift from scooters to electric bicycles, who knows. I think in the end, it's gonna inspire something new. It seems like that home from work will be something that we all get to use to much, much more. And even if it's just one day a week, I mean, hey, that's 20% of transportation. Mm-hmm. So absolutely it's gonna change. It is not gonna go completely away. It might actually give a little bit of a renaissance for personally owned vehicles. But I think in the long run, autonomous, connected, electric, and shared, I think all four are going to continue on a slightly different trajectory.
I guess in the past years, we've seen with autonomous driving that basically investors and startups were trying kind of a cluster shot, trying to try everything what's possible, from delivery robots to delivery vans to trucks for goods, for, then drones, of course, is something that came in, passenger transport, personal vehicles, larger shuttles that are autonomous with more or less autonomous capability or not. And what it now starts accelerating, I think it is kind of the shakeup. We see companies refocusing. We see companies that had probably approaches that they're not deemed the future, like remote driving, like Starsky Robotics did, the truckers that went out of business. Zoox, who tries to boil the ocean by not just developing autonomous driving, but also a complete new vehicle on that, which requires a lot of money, is apparently offering itself for sale. So we see basically that they are trying to find a buyer. While I guess suddenly people see the low-hanging fruits may actually be these little cooling boxes on wheels that are driving in the cities and bringing you the pizza. That may be something, and then once you master that, go and bring it to a larger vehicle like the Neuros do, with a half-sized car that's driving and delivering that stuff there, where also the government starts now to change regulations. You don't need side mirrors, back mirrors actually in these cars anymore, because they're driving on streets, not just on the walkway, but on streets, and that was required so far. So I think there may be a faster shift or a refocusing of this whole autonomous driving industry, first to goods delivery, and that has been something that anyways the whole industry has been struggling. they couldn't find drivers anymore for the truckers. Yeah, in Europe, it's the Germans get all the Polish drivers, so there's a sucking effect. The Polish get all the Ukrainian drivers, sucking effect, and then the Ukrainians all hire the Russian drivers, and then the Russians have no drivers. So the faster we can have autonomous trucks, to a certain extent, that's it. I think this is where the venture capitalists are focusing on that. Passenger driving, of course, passenger is a different thing, because I think we are looking still too simplistic on that. We are thinking we take just the cars that we have and make them autonomous, but we're not thinking of having like pods, like one-person vehicles. That could be much cheaper, much smaller, less footprint, and that may be coming now into this direction. We say, okay, let's do more like a Twizy kind of style car.
Mm-hmm. And one more thing to add, maybe in particular to the Corona pandemic and the situation. I want to say what this does, it puts a huge magnifying glass on top of things that maybe were already happening anyway. So for instance, that we see how much more important it might be to have like a robot delivery. How much under stress the business model of sharing becomes if the economics even shift a little bit from the point where they are, and some others as well. So this huge magnifying glass that we're putting on top of it, I think that's for me at least, an interesting mental model. And at the beginning of this discussion, or in preparation, I thought if it were feasible to actually have a discussion, what would it have looked like right now without Corona? It's impossible to have a discussion like this. But my point is, I think we would still have a discussion right now at the end of May 2020 without Corona, where we say, maybe the hype for autonomous driving, maybe that's gone. And 1 year after the IPOs from Lyft and Uber a little bit later, it's like, who really wants to be the next of those? Mm-hmm. So the future mobility, I think, where we see there's much more realism setting in, where you can say the wheat is separated from the chaff, which needed to happen because it's been going on for 10, 12 years or so. And again, some of these things are getting accelerated. What someone said in I think the third Zoom call that I had this morning, something like this, we all have so many of those. Someone said, let's make sure that we see this as an opportunity for good change, as opposed to just see it as an element of doom. Mm-hmm. And I think that's easier said than done. But
I would add one more point here. I think in the past years, electric vehicles, for example, got really into the public aware. The public became aware of electric vehicles, including governments, regulators, how to subsidize them, how to enable that transition. And that thing, I think, is today is a given. There's no way. I mean, we are looking at a combustion engine, a diesel Fahrverbote, where you're not allowed to drive combustion engine and so on. Now, the Corona crisis, I think, took this magnifying glass that was so far on electric vehicles and put it on autonomous systems. And specifically at the beginning, delivery robots, little vans and so on. And now I think the regulators and governments are starting to look into that. What would we need to do in order to do that? So far, this was mostly theoretical, and it was interesting, but it has not real world impact so far. And that may be coming now more into the focus and going away basically from these discussions of how should an autonomous car make a decision to kill the grandma or the baby, or this is irrelevant discussions, but going into how to enable that, how to make our cities available for robots that are driving on sidewalks, on making a street ready that they can cross the street, and how do you do that with trucks and so on? What does it mean for society and for the jobs that are affected of that? And I think this is if you call it a good outcome, this is probably the most interesting outcome, that autonomous vehicles are becoming suddenly a center point of public focus.
Yeah.
Okay.
Caroline, I think that was the first question out of 25.
I know. Okay, let's go at least into one more question. That's something different. So let's talk about car ownership. A lot of people had actually asked about that. What do you think about the future of car ownership? Are we going more into like shared rides, zip cars, autonomous sharing? Or do you think people will have autonomous cars and take advantage of the self-driving technology in a way that, you know, you're living on your dream beach because you don't mind driving 2 hours somewhere to the city for a meeting because it's not the waste of time anymore because you can sit in the back and work at the same time, right? Yeah. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, well, my opinion on that is always, it is the price that will drive it, yeah? If you look at the calculations and you listen to Oliver Cameron from Voyage, one of those companies that builds a robotaxi, currently they're testing for elderly people. He says he expects actually 80–90% fewer costs per mile than with a privately owned car. And that means if you calculate that, you have today in the European Union, you would pay about 5,600 euro per year for a privately owned car. In the US, it's a little bit more. I think you come up to $10,000, $11,000 per year for your car. And if Oliver is right and he says 80–90% fewer, and he's not the only one saying that, and when you look at it about how this works, you quickly come up with that. You say basically you pay, let's say 560 euro or about $1,000 a year for the same mileage that you had before with your car. That means instead of 11,000, I paid only 1,000. So I saved $10,000. And in Europe, I save 5,000 euro. That's a strong incentive to look into that. And it may be even that I say, you know, I drive to the shopping mall or to the movie center, if there are still movie centers, if they survive, yeah, or to the hospital.
Well, there's drive-in theaters, right?
Yeah. And exactly, that's an interesting thing.
Cinemas.
Or I go to the restaurant, and actually the restaurant or the shopping center or the hospital or the shopping mall sends me the car, and the experience of going to the restaurant, the shopping mall starts already with the car. Then I don't pay anything because the $1, the $2 that I would normally pay them for such a robotaxi is something that I spend way more on stuff, on buying popcorn and soda in the movie theater or spend there. This may be the strongest incentive actually to go to shared model and not keep your private car.
Yeah. So my take is as follows. It's not that easy. And with all due respect, I've heard this many times, and there's some truth to it. But in my mind, it's too simplistic. Because what's the question really? How can we make mobility cheaper? If you ask people, would they say, you know what, it's way too expensive? They might say, okay, gas, well, used to be expensive, now it's cheap. But it doesn't seem to me that society's biggest problem is that mobility is too expensive. It is something that we pay for. Depending on what budget one wants to spend, many people, not everybody, yes, but many people find their mobility solution. And I always get in these discussions also with my academic colleagues that come up with an equation and with econometric modeling and all of it. And they say, here's the equation. If we shift like the price by 10%, and this is going to happen. And I say, no, it's not that easy. Because remember the time when these longboards showed up. Longboard, not electric, just a longboard, okay? Just a long skateboard. On Stanford campus, I observed those things, and one day I looked them up how much a longboard actually costs. Longboard, a nice one, costs $300, $500 or something like this, more than a bicycle. Guess what? A bicycle can go uphill. It gives you actually more functionality. But there are a lot of people who buy a longboard because it's cool, because they like to identify with it, because they like the flow, they like the motion, all of it. There are many things that just don't fit into an equation. And therefore, again, to say it's all going in this one direction, that's too easy. And then to ownership and actually selling automobiles, that is also very often overly simplifying things, because very often who owns, like really owns the vehicle, who holds the title? It's the bank. who actually buys or puts up the money for the vehicle. It's very often not the person who has it in his or her garage. It's actually a financial institution. What I want to say with this, the automotive industry has also been getting pretty creative to deliver the product to us, and we still keep buying it and wanting it without actually owning it. And I think there's a lot of models around this where creativity will come from many different forms, including this like online second market sales platform that we should also factor in. But there's one thing that I do want to say. The automotive industry operates like a well-oiled machine. It's all about efficiency. And if market shares or buyer ratios just shift a few percentages, 5% is already very bad news. And this is really where the industry needs to be very vigilant and innovative to actually figure out what the new ownership and potentially sharing models are.
Mm-hmm. I would probably add as a counterpoint, I started with money, Sven, yeah, mm-hmm. The costs of that, but I also may want to add convenience. Mm-hmm. And convenience is a factor, of course, in the city. If you're in an urban environment, finding a parking space, taking care of the car is very inconvenient. Mm-hmm. Being stuck in traffic. Yeah. And then maybe sometimes you want a car that, you know, buy furniture from IKEA, want to transport that, so you order. And convenience in this case also that within a few minutes it's here, the car, that I can use that, and the next time I have a part, or the next time I have a two-seater. But also you have to look at the rural communities, where today public transport is basically, even in Europe, where there's a mm-hmm. lot of public transport mm-hmm. on the countryside, just not available. And we have a whole demographics of people who do not have access to individual mobility today, because a taxi driver isn't coming out to the 77-year-old Mrs. Smith who's living in the countryside. Her son is working in the city, but she has to go to the grocery store. Mm-hmm. The next grocery store is in the neighboring village, where the bus is going at 9 in the morning and then returning at 3 in the afternoon. And what's she doing in between? And she has still to go a mile from the bus station to home. Now, with an autonomous vehicle that is available for a fraction of the price than a taxi with a human inside, this suddenly becomes an option. And suddenly you add, she has social life. She can go and visit friends and go for tea and play bridge, and handicapped people can use it. And social life is important for quality of life. So this may be additional factors to going, well, she never had basically a car probably, this lady, yeah. So for her, it's not a switch from sharing model, but from not owning anything, but to having suddenly access to individual mobility. So for some demographics, it may be really a boon, and moving there for others who are used to that, but we never.
And I'm not opposing this at all. It's just a question, when might this be available? But maybe we're going to figure that out in the breakout rooms once we mix and mingle with our audience.
Exactly.
Once this great scenario comes through. Because I don't have a great answer for it when it's coming.
Yeah, we will see. So yeah, we do want to have some smaller discussion with that. And, you know, I mean, there seem to be a lot of open questions here still. So maybe room for another session in a couple of months. Who knows? Exactly. So yeah, let's do this. Let's move into the breakout rooms again. Once you get into the breakout room, please unmute yourself. Please put your camera on. Please put your real name on. So yeah, people can actually get to know you, and well then, you know, introduce yourself in the room.
And this is where you would usually say, grab a drink and mix and mingle, right?
Exactly, yes, grab a drink.
You can go to your own refrigerator or coffee machine at home.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right, good, let's do it.
Let's do it.